Ladies and gentlemen, the competitive chess world has two distinct accomplishments. You can become the world champion in slow games or fast games, but you can also be the #1 ranked player. Think of it like in any sport, where if a team finishes with the best record, they still have to go through the playoffs to become the champions and actually be considered legitimate. Well, in this video, we are going to cover the journey of how Magnus Carlsen ascended to the #1 ranking in the world. I do have a separate video called How He Became the World Champion in 2013, but Magnus has been ranked #1 by rating in the entire world in classical chess since 2011. In this video, I'm going to show you 4 games. Timestamps are in the video player. Let's get right into it. And we're actually kicking things off with a game that he played against Nihua in a tournament in London called the London Chess Classic in 2009, not 19. And this game actually was the clinching moment that Magnus became #1 in the world for the first time in 2010. I will explain everything once this game is concluded. Now, all these games are really exciting because about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, the players weren't playing not to lose. There wasn't like a big meta strategy not to lose. They were playing to win every game, and Magnus was no exception. He would play Sicilians, open Sicilians, and Nihua, one of the best players in the history of Chinese chess, opted for bishop b5, only then to play d4 and take the game into a very unique structure. So Magnus makes this bishop commit. Whether it will capture or go backwards, it takes, and very early we get already a very odd structure. This is not something that is very common at all at any sort of Sicilian defense. The computer thinks white is considerably better, but Magnus wants his bishop pair. And even though he was a baby 2800 then, just 2801, he had a very distinct playing style. He knew what he wanted from the opening already. White gets a lot of very quick development here. However, black, despite looking a little bit awkward, plays moves like knight e7 and is going to put the knight on g6 and the bishop on e7. And even though it looks non-standard and looks a little bit strange, there's no real way for white to punish this. This knight would love to come in here and team up with this bishop, but it can't because it's controlled by these two pawns. Not this pawn, but these two pawns. So there's not really any way forward for white, although admittedly he tries with knight e5 and queen h5. You can take the bishop here. That would hang checkmate. That would make for a very, very short video, and probably the rating would have to be something like 2,000 points lower. But this position, Magnus played a move here in 2009 in December that I don't think had ever been played before, and that move is bishop c6. The point of bishop c6 is that you are offering this to your opponent. So if knight takes c6, you're actually not going to take back. You're going to take the bishop. That's the point. So now there are 2 hanging queens. Black will emerge with an okay position after something like knight takes d8, knight takes h5. And even though you can grab one more pawn, right, this happens. So in this position, Nihua plays bishop g3. We have takes, and now Magnus begins a series of moves that look nothing short of absurd. I mean, it doesn't make any sense here because black doesn't have any moves. You can't play g6, right, because this is always an issue. Admittedly, white will have to move the queen. You can't play f6 because that hangs a king. It's also, the thing won't even let you do it. So Magnus plays c4. This is a fascinating move. The fact that you can just have like a bunch of pieces here that can't move whatsoever, but you can just play the move c4 and that just solves all your problems because now you're going to go like this. And the queen from here will laser beam the knight, but also will laser beam the bishop to the queen. So Nihua castles, queen a5, queen g5. Queen g5 is trying to move the bishop so that the queen is protected. So for example, if f6 is played here, you just take it. Oops, because now you have all this. Right, so the queen's protected. On the h5 square, it was not protected. Magnus plays h6, then f6, kicks out trying to kick out the bishop, but gives away a check. That might look insane to you, like why would a guy play h6, f6? Well, this is his idea. Puts his king on e7. Magnus was a cultured man. He was playing the Bond Cloud before it was a thing. And then he anticipates that the queen would have come in, so he sets up this backwards bishop move to kick the queen out, and then cold-blooded, he just plays king f7. You see, when you're 2800, somehow you can rewrite your own rules of chess. You have 2 rooks and 2 bishops. They're all in the back rank. The king has just danced around. The king's just dancing around here, trying to get the safety. And yet, the bishop just comes out backward, like back to exactly where it was. Black has no problems. In fact, black is just about ready to take over the initiative. Why? Because black, low-key, which is a chess term, actually poses more problems in this position than white. because the queen is so annoying. This knight can't really do too much. And once the pawns get moving, because black has so much pawn mobility and white does not have much pawn mobility, 6 of the 7 pawns are basically stuck, black has the advantage. You'll see that right now. Magnus plays e5, brings in the bishop, and Nihua is not taking his foot off the gas. I mean, he tries to get some pawn mobility, right? He tries to attack with the move f4, supported by the bishop, queen, and rook, trying to attack Magnus's king. Magnus very quickly solidifies f5, and now bishop c5, just a nice calm move. Let's get rid of that white bishop. Bishop c5 played. A couple moves later, we're going to see a trade of bishops and rooks, and we're going to see another trade of rooks. So if we just go back a little bit, like right here, I mean, it looked like if anybody's kind of desperate for safety here, it's black, right? King is just defended by this wall of pawns, but because somehow Magnus controlled all the entry points, everything. I mean, he controlled the rook, the knight's entry points, the queen entry points. He's able to stabilize, and once white no longer can pose too many threats here, right? Even this check doesn't matter because the king just slides out of danger. Magnus trades the pieces, and we have an endgame where only black is playing for a win, because at the end of the day, a bishop is better than a knight in an endgame. Not to mention when you have all of these pawns, 5 of white's 7 pawns are on light squares, and Magnus has a light squared bishop. Somehow everything falls into place, and here we begin the expansion. A5, right? King goes to safety real quick for black to g8. Now we have b5. Now we have b4. And I mean, it's a hot knife through butter at this point. Takes, knight d1, bishop a4. Yeah, like I said, when you have so many liabilities on light squares, you're going to have some issues. Now here Nihua can play the move queen d2. But Magnus will play queen d4, and this is, I mean, a terrifying position. If you take, another pawn comes forward, the army of pawns marches in, and I'm sure the players are also low on time here, so Nihua goes for a tactical solution to the position, but what ends up happening is he opens his king too much. Magnus swarms the king, and look at this. Check to deflect the queen back, and now the queen is ready to infiltrate on the dark squares. A beautiful, like, symphony here by Magnus of colors, right? Dark square infiltration, and the bishop is a light square killer, and on move 42, Nihua resigns. He resigns because it's the dark square play that leads to the light squares collapsing, and the pawns in the center are going to fall apart, not to mention the fact that this knight is just stranded on the back rank. Nihua resigned because he has no way to protect all his pawns, which will lead to the devastating loss of material and the game. Incredible. I mean, Magnus just makes it look so easy sometimes. I honestly wish I could play like him. He won 3 games in the London Chess Classic in 2009 in December and was the #1 ranked player in the world for a lot of 2010. But Vishwanathan Anand took over, and that was the heyday of Anand. He was the world champion, so he was obviously in peak form despite being something like 20 years younger than Magnus. Older, 20 years older than Magnus. He could not have been 20 years younger than Magnus. He would have been literally like 3 years old. So, no. But in 2011 in June, Magnus played a tournament in Medias, Romania, called the King's Tournament. And he also won 3 games there and drew the rest of them to reclaim the #1 spot forever. Well, not forever, but it's March 19th, 2022, and he still has it. So I don't know when you're watching in the future. Do let me know in the comments. Let me know if the channel still exists. So his first game of this tournament in Romania, he's playing against Hikaru Nakamura. We have an exchange queen's gambit decline. Now you're going to notice something about this position. White has not yet put the knight on f3. So he can actually wait and build up with the knight like this, but there's many flexible setups. So let's see what he chooses. He chooses queen c2, and Hikaru here plays bishop g4. That's a very provocative move, but it could be intending to meet this with a capture. It also could just be intending to find a way for the bishop to develop, because you can't develop to f5. So black plays bishop g4, e3 by Magnus, bishop h5, and now we see the bishop rotating backwards. Okay, so that was one of Hikaru's ideas as well, is to trade bishops with Magnus. We have long castles. Again, it's 2011, so back then people are opposite side castling, people are attacking each other, they're not interested in what Leela Alpha Zero Stockfish have to say about these positions. Look, I mean, this is just good old-fashioned brawling. Now, Magnus has a choice. He can play g4, h4, but the king hasn't castled yet. Hikaru has actually played this in a very unique way, so Magnus decides to attack the center with e4. But here comes Hikaru down on the queen side with the move b4, forcing the knight to the side. Now, this might look like a concession, but it's not, because if you continue to attack here, you very quickly realize that one man is creating threats. And that man is from is from Norwegian. That man is Norwegian, right? That man is creating threats because there is this, there is e6, there is queen taking this pawn if this pawn comes over here. So Yeah, Hikaru has to be very careful, and now he castles, and Magnus is like, well, now I should probably attack on the king side, right? So h4. H4 is a very, very good move. Obviously, the move h5 is going to come momentarily. You should not play h5 yet. First, you should deflect the opponent's knight into the middle, and now h5. And I mean, this is just good old-fashioned brawl right here. I mean, these dudes talk some trash to each other at a pub, and now they're throwing hands. I mean, h5 is on the board. You give Magnus a few more moves, the game is just going to end. So Hikaru has to play g5. He has to keep the h file closed. Magnus just plays h6. I mean, he just plays h6 straight up. He's like, yo, go ahead and take my bishop. It doesn't matter because I'm going to take here, and there's nothing that you can do from preventing queen h7. So Hikaru now has to respond to this threat as well. He has to block the white queen out. And Magnus, just look at this. He's like, all right, I'm setting up the pieces for the next game. This game's over. Count it as a win. No. Knight 7, b6. We're not done yet. The thing is, anytime you want to ruin a king position, you really should have your pawns go first, right? It's exactly what Magnus is doing, because in the long run, this could even be an asset in endgames. So knight c5, right? Takes. Look at this. b3. Beautiful counter shot from Hikaru. I told you, if you want to ruin a structure, you got to come forward with pawns. If AB, you have knight before hitting the queen and mate. So that's very bad. So queen takes, and rook takes c5. And just for a very brief moment, Hikaru's just a pawn up. I mean, he's just a pawn up, and his attack might very well continue. So Magnus has to seize the initiative back. He jumps back with the knight and takes the pawn on g5, while Hikaru's rook is arriving on the second rank. Hikaru goes back to queen e7. We have queen d3. Queen d3 is a nice move. It targets kind of everything important in the position. Rook f8 by Hikaru, rook f1. Now, this move, rook f8, I think is where the game sort of turned. Maybe queen e7 as well. Just a couple of just slight inaccuracies against Magnus is all it takes. One move, a little bit too defensively, and now Hikaru tries to be a little more mobile with his pawns in order to defend his king. But the final domino falls here. You know, that final flick, g4. And that's it. You take one quick look at this position, you realize that these knights are good, but they're not doing anything substantial. This rook is all right, but it's not doing anything substantial. And one thing that Hikaru tries to do here is trade queens to sort of escape the danger. But that's the thing about Magnus. The pressure is never over. And even though he's able to trade a queen and a pawn here, the bigger issue is the h-pawn. The surviving thing of the attack is this massively advanced h-pawn, which will be an anchor for the white pieces. And watch as Magnus just goes straight into the position. Using tactics, if rook g7 and you take, there's bishop h6, just completely winning. So king h8, and we have knight h4 threatening knight g6 mate. And I think Hikaru just took and resigned, which is, you know, kind of flashy. Took on g7 and just called it a day, because you just cannot stop this. And that one pawn won the game for Magnus, all the way back to h4 when he played this move after Hikaru castled, right? This h4 move. You would think that this pawn is going to be, you know, used to brute force the black position and just get in, but he actually just advances it. And that's the thing about attacking chess. You don't always have to give mate. You can just leave yourself a permanent asset. And as your opponent is sort of twisting and turning to defend himself, he realizes that even when everything settles and there's no more attack, the pressure is not over. No queens on the board, no problem, right? Rooks swarm in, get to that g7 square using that pawn as a tactical anchor, and Magnus wins a very nice game after 38 moves versus Hikaru Nakamura. Very, very respectable 2-7, 7-4. A round or two later, Magnus was playing the hometown hero, Romanian Grandmaster Liviu Dieter Nisipeanu. I don't know if that's exactly how you say his name, but he's one of the greatest Romanian players ever. In fact, he literally might be the greatest Romanian player of all time. Very strong player, highest rated 2700. And Nisipeanu played the Queen's Gambit accepted, so he was not looking to get into any battle versus Magnus in a QGD. Queen's Gambit declined. And Magnus played the classical, so he just played e3, he took, and he played knight f3. Even to this day, this is a massive main line. Nowadays, this position is seen all the time. Here, there are a million setups. White can play b3, white can play knight, rook, pawn, queen, bishop sliding back to any one of these squares. But there is also the move d takes c5. This invitation for a queenless middle game. And Magnus plays it. And I think he has played it before, but he doesn't play it much at all. It's not really that popular anymore. Black has the option to take and lose the right to castle, or take and bring white the rook to the d file. So Black decides to do it this way, right? bishop e2. Then you might say, why would Magnus go bishop e2? Like, why would you do this? I mean, you can develop both pieces. Like, if a beginner did that levy, you would yell at them. Absolutely, I would. The thing is that you are trying to play against b5. So, for example, if in this position you play knight c3, black plays b5, and now when you try to play like this, I'm quick enough, and I have a target on c3. However, if you play bishop e2 and then I play b5, well, this is an entirely different story because I don't have a knight here. So now I go this way. You see, that is the major difference. This is the meta strategy at the highest level of Grandmasters. Natural moves aren't so natural. Zigging and zagging around pawns like this is everything. And I mean, it's so important. And so black plays king e7 because he doesn't want to commit his pawn and decides, okay, well, I'm not going to commit my b pawn. I'm just going to finish my development like this. No, look at Magnus. Look at this menace. Knight d2, knight b3, knight a5. I mean, this knight smells blood. It wanted a bishop. It wanted a pawn. Black plays rook a7. What black should have done here is bishop c6, I think. Just trying to give away this light-scored bishop for a nice and solid structure. Just no more pressure. Of course, white is slightly better. But when you play moves like rook a7 against Magnus, you understand he drools. Like some people drool at, you know, we all drool at different stuff. Food, you know, maybe you see, actually, I probably shouldn't condone drooling at, you know, beautiful people. Keep that to yourself, you gross gremlins. Yeah, I don't know, maybe a beautiful scenic view. Magnus drools at passive pieces and, well, I don't know. Maybe he doesn't. It feels kind of weird describing the man like that, but, well, we're already in the video. I'm not going to edit this out. Sorry, let's keep going. Knight c4. You see? Look at Magnus. Oh, yes. I made Nisipeanu put his a7 rook so passively. I'm still hunting this bishop pair, right? b3, go ahead and take my knight. I want those two bishops, right? And finally, Nisipeanu has no choice. Because if you just wait around longer, at some point white is going to take. So he gives up his light-scored bishop, and he plays knight c6. And I just talked about this, right? I just talked about this. So black gets to the desired solid structure. Okay. g6. Magnus, take it away. g4. He's got good play on the queen side, good play in the center, but as I always like to say, if you win a battle in chess on all three sides of the board, you're going to win the game, right? So h6, bishop f1. It's the second time we've seen a bishop going all the way back. We saw this also in the game against Hikaru, right? Bishop f1, no longer a target for any piece, and the flexibility to pressure this side, but also this diagonal if you would really like, right? So rook c8, rook c1, knight d5, and Magnus just continues to expand on the king side, just ever so slowly. Like, it's a kind of position where black sits and waits. Black knows that the attack is coming, and black will only be able to respond if, you know, if white actually advances. Black could fight back here with the move g5. It's a very interesting move. That's one way to fight back, trying to allow the opponent to get themselves into a little trouble. But Nisipeanu plays king e8, and that allows Magnus to get this. And as I said, Magnus salivates at weaknesses. But look at this control of all these pawns. And there's a move in this position that will absolutely tip the scale, and that move is king g2. King g2 is not looking to get into the battle with the king. King g2 is looking for rook h1 in the future. That is what that's looking for. You traded these pawns, you're going to move your bishop, and you're going to go in here with the rook. And black has to be very mindful of this. And when you play knight b6 and I play bishop d3, suddenly you don't have the luxury of defending anything. You can go like this, and now Nisipeanu really should consider trading one of these rooks. Instead, he grabs a pawn. And that proves to be absolutely fatal because after rook d8, king d8, the rook goes to h1. And despite Magnus being a very, very, very temporary pawn down, between knight e5, rook h8, and rook h7 hitting all of this and a pawn hanging on b7, the game is over. Knight goes back to d5, f5, and Magnus very calmly takes the knight. Now, you might notice he didn't take en passant, so we can drop a brick on Magnus. But bishop takes d5. If you don't know that inside joke about en passant, don't worry about it. Everything's okay. Nisipeanu resigns. Why? Why did he resign? Check. King c7, rook h7. There's no way to easily protect this bishop. For example, if you play here, I play bishop d4, bishop b6, knight g6, you're just going to get mated, or you're going to have to lose all your pieces. So bishop takes d5, and Magnus Carlsen beats Nisipeanu in 30 moves. And he makes it look just unbearably simple. Like, I just don't understand whatsoever. But there was another player in this tournament who many of you may know, and his name was Vasily Ivanchuk. Now, his current name, he actually changed his name several years ago, is Vasil Ivanchuk. Back then it was Vasily, so I'm gonna call him the name that he changed his name to, or I'll just call him Ivanchuk. And Ivanchuk has been in his career ranked number 2 in the world many times, one of the most interesting and creative players of all time, called by Magnus chess genius. I think actually Ivanchuk called Magnus not a genius, so he did not return the compliment. Now this one was also a Queen's Gambit declined. It was a Rogozin Queen's Gambit declined, which nowadays is an ultra popular weapon. We have bishop g5, knight d7, takes, and Ivanchuk attacks the middle of the board with the move c5. Now, that's not extremely important. The opening isn't the most important thing in the world. What's important is this structure. Notice, black has a d pawn, but no c or e pawn. White has just kind of coordinated 4 and 2. This is an isolated pawn. What a player with an isolated pawn likes to do is play dynamically around it and also try to shove it forward into his opponent's face. Magnus is going to try to trade some pieces, blockade the square, and create this into a long-term weakness and either win it and win the game or force the opponent to defend it for so long that he's able to kind of create problems elsewhere. So bishop g4, knight d4, and we sort of see these things coming to life, right? Magnus is blockading the pawn very nicely, but Ivanchuk is playing on the open lines around it. He's got good knight control of the middle. He's not allowing Magnus really to come back and attack this pawn. Rook e8. Magnus plays b3, disallowing the knight from coming to c4, and rook c2, rook c8. Very, very cramped position. But now Magnus begins kind of the rich extraction process. So first he trades a rook. Okay, he removes one of black's pieces. Right? Bishop back to c1. He's offering a trade. If this trade occurs, that's yet another piece that dies and one less defender of the black position. Not to mention complete control almost of the only open file. So rook c8. Magnus takes on a3. Black can't take the queen because his own queen would be hanging. And here, Ivanchuk plays a move where he relies on dynamics of the position that awaits, but it breaks the protocol of isolated pawn play. He decides to trade bishops, which again, from just in a nutshell, you don't want to trade too many pieces when you have an isolated pawn. But I guess Ivanchuk just really didn't like the fact that if Magnus got one more move, like let's say he played h3, that this bishop is just the worst bishop ever. It just can't move, right? And Ivanchuk might still need to rely on piece trades to get any sort of activity. So he decides to trade bishops, but Magnus now doesn't look back. Plays knight f5. Knight f5 is intending to slowly, just again, making sure he's never getting back rank mated. You should also ensure that. And puts his queen smack in the middle of the board. That knight is hit. It either has to move or be protected. And now Magnus rotates over to f4. Two things are brewing. Pressure here or a demolition of the king side. As we see all the forces lining up and Ivanchuk is right there ready to meet him. Queen c5. What do we know about trades in positions with isolated pawns? We actually kind of welcome them, but here, you never take with the pawn. You have wasted 32 moves if you play like this. You have to take with the knight. And just like in the Nihua game, Magnus is so smart at controlling entry points. None of these knights can come forward. I mean, you can play knight h4, but that's a dumb move. That does nothing. So knight e5 played, and now Magnus sees this is coming. He brings his rook to the party, and now also his king. And very slowly, he just expands his position, just like he did against Nisipeanu. Rook c1, pinning the knight to the rook. King e7, slowly expanding. Slowly expanding. Look at this. This is a tactical expansion. If you take, there's knight f5 always, right? So now that's annoying. And he does kind of the same thing that he did to Nisipeanu. He attacks the h-file. And even though it looks like Ivanchuk is coming in, knight g3 and f5 and h6, he's created a weakness. b4, as Ivanchuk is stuck defending the center and the king side with this awkward rook position. Look at Magnus. Expanding on all sides of the board. The rook comes in, targets f7, a4, still controlling the entry points. Now, of course, black is defending quite well, right? But a5, look at this. I mean, now we have more split weaknesses. We have 4 isolated targets by black. And at any given moment, you might zoom and you might go find one. Rook h4, and now the rook might come back. The rook is coming backwards. Knight d6 back. There it is. I'm going this way. While your rook is stuck defending that side of the board, I am now coming this way. This is pure Magnus right here. This is like pure Magnus form. Oh, my wife woke up. She just messaged me. I'm going to finish this recording and I'm going to go say hello to her. Rook a8, just in case you wanted a peek behind the curtain of daily life of Gotham Chess. King c7, knight e6, the knight swarms in. And, I mean, again, it's 56 moves and it feels like the player playing against Magnus is desperately defending. Remember how Magnus avoided a rook trade like 20 moves ago? Well, now he doesn't. Why? There's a pawn. And that pawn was only able to be captured because 12 moves ago, Magnus advanced, isolated that pawn as a weakness, and you'll also remember that a long time ago, Magnus pushed his h-pawn and created this weakness, right? He isolated those weaknesses as well. Well, just hang on a second. As Magnus pushes the king, pushes the a-pawn and forces the king to be passive, look at him bringing his king and his knight now. It's like a symphony. Look at this tactic. If you take here, I take your knight and I promote and you can't stop it. This game has such a flashy finish. Look at that. Did you see that? Magnus just lost a piece. Yes, he lost a piece because he calculated the fact that this knight would be stuck guarding this pawn. And now the king will walk, win the f-pawn, and Magnus calculated that this was a winning endgame. This absolute savage, sacrificing his remaining pieces to get the king to h6, and this king is too far, and the game is over. And look at the final move of the game. He took the pawn on h6. Instant replay for those of you that watch me in another tab or something while you do homework. Magnus played h4, h5, isolated the h-pawn. Slowly built up his position, isolated the a-pawn, and proceeded to win them both. And then he used the a-pawn as a decoy, sacrificed a full piece to make the opponent's knight passive, to get his king in, and the king hunts down the rest of the pawns, and Ivanchuk resigns. If that doesn't deserve the #1 position, then I have no idea what to tell you. After this tournament, Magnus drew the rest of his games. After this tournament, Magnus was rated 2,821, and he never surrendered the first place position. Now, I do have 2 other videos. They are called How Magnus Carlsen Became the World Champion. You can go see that. He almost didn't have a chance to become the world champion because of the candidates tournament fiasco in the final round when he competed in 2013. But he did, and to this day, he has never been surpassed as #1 ranked classical chess player in the world. Yeah, I mean, that's how he did it. And he's currently on pace, 2865. He's trying to get 2900. He's been at 2889. I do have a video on that, posted that a few days ago. And that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Let me know any other video ideas that you have in the comments. You can thumbs up other people's comments. As well, I recorded this on a Saturday, so you all have a great weekend, or if you're watching this not on a Saturday, sorry. Hope you have a good day. I'll see you in the next video. Get out of here.